When Roger Waters projected his father's war photograph onto the stage during Pink Floyd's performance, he never expected to see his mother sitting in the audience watching. The moment their eyes met across 40,000 people, Waters stopped the entire concert and ran to the microphone, creating the most emotionally raw moment in rock history. It was July 21, 1990, and Pink Floyd was performing The Wall at the massive Potsdamer Platz in Berlin, just months after the fall of the Berlin Wall. This wasn't just any concert. It was a historically significant performance designed to commemorate the reunification of Germany and to celebrate the end of the Cold War that had divided Europe for nearly half a century. The symbolism was profound. Performing The Wall in a city that had literally been divided by a wall, in front of an audience that included people from both East and West Germany experiencing their first shared cultural event in decades. Roger Waters had conceived this performance as more than entertainment. It was meant to be a statement about the futility of barriers between people and the universal human cost of war and division. The production was elaborate, even by Pink Floyd standards, featuring a massive stage construction, projected imagery, and theatrical elements that would transform the concert into a multimedia experience addressing themes of isolation, conflict, and ultimately, reconciliation. For Roger Waters personally, The Wall had always been deeply autobiographical, though audiences often experienced it primarily as a conceptual work about fame, alienation, and social criticism. The album and the live performances contained layers of personal meaning that traced back to the most formative experiences of Waters' life, particularly the loss of his father during World War II. Eric Fletcher Waters had been a conscientious objector who eventually joined the Royal Navy during the war, serving as a lieutenant. He was killed at Anzio in Italy in 1944, when Roger was just 5 months old. This loss had shaped every aspect of Waters' worldview, his approach to music, and his understanding of the cost that ordinary families pay for the political decisions made by governments and military leaders. The Berlin performance of The Wall included a segment that Waters had developed specifically for this historically significant venue. During the song, "Bring the Boys Back Home," the stage screens would display photographs of soldiers from various conflicts, representing the universal experience of families losing loved ones to war. Among these photographs was an image of Eric Fletcher Waters in his Royal Navy uniform, a young man who would never return home to meet his son. Waters had used his father's photograph in previous performances, but there was something particularly poignant about including it in Berlin, a city that had seen so much conflict and division, in front of an audience that included many people who had their own experiences with family separation due to war and political barriers. What Waters didn't know as he prepared for that evening's performance was that his mother, Mary Waters, had decided to attend the concert. Mary Waters was 79 years old in 1990, and she rarely traveled to see her son's performances. She had supported Roger's musical career from the beginning, but the scale and intensity of Pink Floyd concerts, combined with her advanced age, meant that she typically experienced her son's artistic achievements through recordings and media coverage rather than live attendance. However, the historical significance of the Berlin Wall concert had captured her imagination. She understood the symbolic importance of performing The Wall in a city that had just experienced the destruction of its own wall, and she felt that this particular performance represented something uniquely meaningful in her son's career. Additionally, she knew that Roger would be honoring his father's memory during the show, and she felt compelled to witness this tribute in person. Mary had purchased her ticket through normal channels, without informing Roger or his management that she would be attending. She wanted to experience the concert as an ordinary audience member, not as the artist's mother receiving special treatment. She had secured a seat in the general admission area, several rows back from the stage, where she would blend in with the thousands of other attendees. As the concert began, Mary found herself deeply moved by the production's scale and emotional intensity. She watched her son perform with the kind of pride that only a parent can experience. But she was also experiencing the performance as an audience member, allowing herself to be absorbed by the music and imagery without the distraction of personal connection to the performer. When the segment featuring war photographs approached, Mary felt a mixture of anticipation and emotional preparation. She knew that Eric's photograph would be displayed, and she had steeled herself to see her late husband's image projected to thousands of people in this historically significant setting. Roger Waters, meanwhile, was completely absorbed in the performance. The Berlin audience was particularly responsive to the themes of The Wall, and the energy in the venue was unlike anything he had experienced in previous performances of the work. There was a sense that the audience understood the music's meaning on a level that went beyond entertainment. They were experiencing it as a reflection of their own recent history and their hopes for the future. As Bring the Boys Back Home began and the war photographs started appearing on the massive screens behind the stage, Waters felt the familiar emotional weight that always accompanied this portion of the performance. Seeing his father's photograph displayed to thousands of people never became routine. It remained a profoundly moving experience that connected his personal loss to the universal experience of families affected by war. The photograph of Eric Fletcher Waters appeared on the screen, showing a young naval officer in uniform, looking directly at the camera with the kind of serious expression that characterized official military portraits of the era. For Roger, the image represented not only his father, but also all the young men who had died in conflicts around the world, leaving behind families and unfulfilled potential. As Waters continued singing and the audience absorbed the visual tribute to fallen soldiers, he began scanning the crowd, as he often did during performances, making eye contact with audience members and gauging their emotional response to the music and imagery. That's when he saw her. In the general admission section, several rows back from the stage, Mary Waters was sitting quietly, tears streaming down her face as she looked up at her deceased husband's photograph being projected to 40,000 people. She wasn't displaying the dramatic emotional responses that sometimes characterized audience reactions at Pink Floyd concerts. She was experiencing something much more personal and profound. The recognition was instantaneous and overwhelming. Roger Waters saw his 79-year-old mother, whom he hadn't expected to be present, watching her late husband's image being honored in front of tens of thousands of people in one of the most historically significant venues in the world. For several seconds, Waters continued performing mechanically while processing what he was seeing. His mother, in the audience, watching her husband being remembered and honored 46 years after his death, in Berlin, at a concert celebrating the end of division and the possibility of reconciliation. The emotional weight of the moment became too great for Waters to maintain his professional composure. In an action that surprised his bandmates, the technical crew, and the entire audience, Roger Waters stopped singing mid-verse. He stepped away from his microphone stand and began walking across the stage toward the edge that was closest to where his mother was sitting. The massive venue, which moments before had been filled with music and the voices of 40,000 people singing along, began to quiet as the audience realized that something unplanned was happening. Waters reached the edge of the stage and looked directly at his mother, pointing to her and then placing his hand over his heart. Mary, recognizing that her son had seen her and was acknowledging her presence, raised her hand in a small wave, while tears continued to flow down her face. Then Roger Waters did something that no one in attendance would ever forget. He walked back to his microphone, but instead of resuming the song, he addressed the audience directly, his voice carrying clearly through the venue's sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen," Waters said, his voice thick with emotion, "my mother is here tonight." The audience, many of whom were unfamiliar with Waters' personal history, listened in respectful silence as he continued. She's 79 years old, and she came to Berlin to see this show. She's sitting out there in the audience, and she's watching her husband, my father, being remembered and honored. He died in the war when I was 5 months old, and she raised me by herself. Waters paused, collecting himself before continuing. This whole show, The Wall, everything Pink Floyd has done, it all comes from the love and strength that woman gave me after my father was killed. She's the reason I'm standing here, and she's the reason any of us understand what it means to tear down the walls that divide us from each other. The response from the audience was immediate and profound. 40,000 people began applauding, not for the performance they had been watching, but for Mary Waters, who was sitting among them, experiencing this unexpected public recognition of her life's sacrifice and dedication. Mary, overwhelmed by the attention and the public acknowledgement of her late husband's service and her own role in raising Roger, covered her face with her hands, while people around her offered comfort and support. Waters, seeing his mother's emotional response, made another unprecedented decision. "I need to go to her," he announced to the audience. "The show will continue, but right now, I need to be with my mother." Roger Waters handed his bass guitar to a crew member and left the stage, walking into the audience area to reach his mother. Security personnel, initially confused by this deviation from the planned performance, quickly realized what was happening and facilitated Waters' movement through the crowd. The reunion between mother and son took place in the midst of 40,000 people, with Mary standing to embrace Roger, while the audience watched this intensely personal moment unfold in a very public setting. "I'm so proud of you," Mary whispered to her son, loud enough for nearby audience members to hear. "Your father would be so proud of what you've done here tonight." The embrace lasted several minutes, with Roger and Mary both crying as they held each other, while Eric Fletcher Waters' photograph continued to be displayed on the massive screens above them. Eventually, Waters knew he had to return to the stage to complete the performance, but the nature of the show had been fundamentally transformed by this unexpected family moment. When he returned to the stage, Waters addressed the audience one final time before resuming the music. "Thank you for sharing this moment with my mother and me," he said. "This is what tearing down walls really means. It means recognizing that we all have families, we all have people we love, and we all have losses that connect us to each other rather than divide us." The remainder of the performance took on an emotional intensity that exceeded even Waters' ambitious expectations for the evening. The audience, having witnessed this authentic display of family love and historical remembrance, responded to every song and every visual element with a depth of engagement that transformed the concert from entertainment into something approaching a shared spiritual experience. Mary Waters remained for the entire performance, now recognized by the people around her as the mother of the artist they were watching. Audience members offered her their programs to sign, shared their own stories about family members lost to war, and thanked her for the sacrifice she had made in raising a son who could create music that spoke to such universal human experiences. After the concert, Mary was escorted backstage for a private reunion with her son and the other members of Pink Floyd. David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright, who had been moved by witnessing the family moment during the performance, spent time with Mary and expressed their appreciation for the strength and dedication that had enabled Roger to create the music that had defined their collective careers. "Mrs. Waters," David Gilmour told her, "everything Roger has written that means something to people comes from what you taught him about love and loss. Thank you for raising him to understand those things deeply enough to share them with the rest of us." The Berlin performance became legendary, not only for its historical significance and production values, but also for the authentic human moment that had occurred when personal family history intersected with public artistic expression. Video footage of the family reunion circulated widely, and the story became part of Pink Floyd mythology. For Mary Waters, the experience provided a kind of closure that she hadn't expected. Seeing her late husband honored in front of tens of thousands of people, and having her own role in Roger's life publicly acknowledged, gave her a sense that Eric's sacrifice and her own dedication had contributed to something larger and their individual family experience. "I felt like Eric was there with us," she said later, "not just in the photograph, but actually present, watching his son honor his memory and seeing the good that came from our tragedy." For Roger Waters, the experience reinforced his belief that the most powerful art emerges from authentic personal experience, and that the universal themes that resonate with audiences are always grounded in specific human relationships and genuine emotional truth. The photograph of Eric Fletcher Waters, which had been displayed hundreds of times during various performances of The Wall, took on new meaning after the Berlin concert. It was no longer just a symbol of the universal cost of war. It had become a representation of how personal loss can be transformed into artistic expression that helps other people process their own experiences with grief, separation, and hope. Years later, Roger Waters continued to include his father's photograph in performances of The Wall. But he would often tell audiences about the night in Berlin when his mother surprised him by attending the concert and witnessed thousands of people honoring her husband's memory and her own contribution to the music they were hearing. The story became a reminder that behind every public artistic expression, there are private family stories of sacrifice, dedication, and love that provide the foundation for the music's emotional authenticity and universal appeal. If this story of family love, transcending time, the power of honoring those we've lost, and the unexpected moments when private grief becomes shared healing inspired you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with anyone who understands that the most meaningful art comes from genuine human experience and family relationships that shape our understanding of love and loss. Have you ever experienced a moment when personal history unexpectedly became part of a larger public experience? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible stories about how family connections can transform artistic expression into something sacred.